the same parts of the Bible, even though that they have decided that they are not accurate.
Well, these are
I don't know
different groups of people.
what usually happens. I mean, is there any kind of publication that they announce that what they have reached in these conventions, or what happens as a follow-up to that?
Oh yes, they do, but these are anyone who would say something like that is not going to go back to his church and start quoting this verse and beating someone over the head with it. These are different groups of people, and no doubt some fundamentalist Christian was sitting there and watching that, and when he saw the man say, probably Jesus didn't say this, John 3:16, and he put his foot through the television in anger, because they really see themselves as being the only true people. We would never dare to suggest that there was some problem. I remember seeing Jerry Falwell talk. He's a Baptist, and so he believes there's just no mistakes anywhere in the Bible. That's absolutely out of the question. And yet there were some Baptists who were meeting and saying things like this. They dared to suggest, well, maybe this part is not quite accurate, and so on. And he was speaking. He's very upset about this. And he says, I don't care if people say that, but I wish they wouldn't call themselves Baptists. I want to make it clear, I'm not in that group. This upset him. So if they want to do that, they must take a different name. They must be a different club, so they cannot be identified with me. These are very different positions. But that material is available in the public library. You can find follow-ups to that kind of thing. Maybe hear more about that later.
You have anything to say? My question is somewhat similar to brother's question, but it is like you said, there are Christians like Baptists and different groups are believing in Mark, John, Lucas, and Matthew. Is there any group of Christians who believe in all those books, and is there any church of Christians who practice all of them? Like you said about resurrection, if somebody wants to know about resurrection, give them 4 books and they come up with one answer. Is there any group of Christians, believing in all those books and practicing in their church?
Well, that's what a fundamentalist claims to do, that he accepts everything, even the problems. And that's the difficulty. If you put the problem in front of him, then he will tell you, well, either that's not really a mistake, or that mistake didn't used to be there. And this is the finish of the matter. He doesn't have any difficulty with reconciling how a son can be 2 years older than his father, because that's not a problem. Just because I say it isn't. And that kind of attitude, you're not going to get anywhere with reasonable discussion anyway. But groups like a more mainstream Christianity, they would tend to weigh this, and they would freely admit something like, well, yes, that's a mistake, or this is an exaggeration, but it doesn't hurt their belief. They just say, well, this was written by a man, he got carried away, and he went too far, and that's understandable, and it's forgivable. They're not upset. It doesn't mean they have to go and change their whole way of thinking. But that's a very different approach, and I suspect is that a fundamentalist type of person is not comfortable with that, because this would mean he'd have to exercise his mind to make judgments. That he would have to start deciding for himself, well, what do I believe if I don't have a book that I trust 100%? I would have to start thinking too much, and I don't want to do that. I'd rather just say, well, in spite of the mistakes or difficulties, I'll just trust what people say, and that'll be the finish of it. There are fundamentalist types. There are people who believe absolutely every word in the Bible, who will also tell you that Jesus never claimed he was God, and various other things. So even the fundamentalists can be in disagreement about the interpretation of these scriptures. But these are much rarer. But there are still people who would be as stubborn in refusing to admit mistakes, and yet at the same time have a somewhat more sensible interpretation of the words. I know that must be often confusing to the Muslim who was used to coming from a kind of a homogeneous society, or most people, they think pretty much the same. And then you come in and you meet a man, he says he's a Christian, and really you want to say, well, in which flavor? Because there's so many different descriptions that come under this, and they can be very much opposed to each other, very different ideas. You have to get used to that.
And what are those people called? Like they are Baptist or what? Catholics.
What's that now?
And they are called Baptists or Catholics?
There's in the U.S. I think it's 120 some denominations. There's just all kinds. Well, that's why. Yeah, in fact, in a little town where I was raised, and at that time there were not even 2,000 people lived there. They had 4 different kinds of Lutheran church. So I mean, there's subdivisions and subdivisions within those.
Assalamu alaikum. All through my experience in high school and recently in college, I never seem to get past. First of all, I always feel like I have to explain what Islam is not. I have to explain that Islam is not terrorism, Islam is not making bombs, Islam is not oppressing your women. And then if I get past through that, the only thing I get through is the 5 pillars of Islam, because it just seems like the basic thing to approach them with. So do you have any ideas of what to present before that, and then how to get past that point quickly? Like before the semester's up.
in 25 words or less, too. Yes. I guess I was sort of hinting at it before when I was saying when you start reading the second surah, it tells you something about who this is for, and it's constructed in a positive sense. You know, it doesn't start off by saying, right, this begins the story of Islam. It's not this, it's not that, and it's not that. And it starts positively, and you. No, go ahead. Okay, you need this.
I think part of the problem is that we usually, in the back of our mind, we have all these criticisms and what we see as attacks against our faith. Part of the problem is within ourselves. We feel that we have to begin by first fending off all these criticisms and attacks, and then in the last few minutes giving them a little brief introduction into Islam. When I first became interested in Islam and I would start asking Muslims about their faith, I was an atheist at the time, they would invariably begin by telling me, well, we don't persecute women and we don't do this and we don't do that. And I would say, I'm not assuming that you do. I really just want to know what you believe. Can you tell me what you feel about God? Do you have a concept of God? Or what are your feelings about God? How do you see your relationship to God? Well, we don't feel like the Christians that... No, I didn't ask you how the Christians feel. Or sometimes people tell me, we don't believe like you do that. I didn't come to find out what I believe. I came to find out what you believe. I think a lot of times the problem is with us ourselves. We begin defending when very often people aren't interested in the defense. They really want to know what you really believe. So there's some people that are on the attack right from the beginning. But a lot of times a high school audience is just very innocent, or a grammar school audience is very innocent, very, very curious. What are Muslims all about? So I think sometimes the fault is within ourselves. You might just try formulating for yourself an hour lecture, a half-hour lecture about what you feel Islam is.